I am back. I'd like to say by popular demand, but we just don't know whether that's the case or not.
Lenovo have made this kind of Wall-E style robot, and it's a kind of AI workmate concept.
I don't know, even 5 years ago, the CTO still probably wasn't much in the boardroom, right?
And if you invert it, and the inversion isn't stupid, it's a strategy.
But actually, most managers and leaders at some point have had to deal with some variation of this.
That is baloney, though it's almost indistinguishable from real vendor marketing copy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I am back. I'd like to say by popular demand, but we just don't know whether that's the case or not. And I just want to say thank you very much to Sam Burrows, who did a fantastic job last week. It was an all female takeover. I think it went down really well. We got some good feedback about it. And you had some interesting guests talking about ultra light speed, heavy compute. Oh my God, it was complicated, but it was all good. And Sam maintained my lead in the mid-episode game. So thank you very much to Sam. Sophie, was it a good episode for you? Did you cry because you were missing me? What happened?
I don't think I cried on camera, but you were absolutely missed. But no, it was fantastic to share an episode with Sam, and I think she did an excellent job, as you say, with some very kind of heavy lifting technical stuff. But it's great to learn about the complicated tech bits. But no, you were missed, but you've had a good week by the sounds of it.
Yeah. I had a bit of time off. Me and the current Mrs. Crawford went to Edinburgh for a few days. Lovely city. If you haven't been there recently, give it a try. Not too bad. And then back to the grindstone, as it were. But pleased to be back in the chair. And hopefully I'll carry on Sam's good work here as well. But not only did you do an all-female podcast for us last week, and not only was it International Women's Day on Sunday, and we're hearing a lot about that in the press as we do, but you had the Women in Tech Leaders event last week. Tell us what happened, Sophie. It sounded good. I saw some pictures. Was it good?
Yeah, we did. It was absolutely fantastic. We were talking about culture as a leadership tool, and so how leaders can really understand dynamics happening within their organizations and tips and tricks to really get the most out of really large scale teams working together. So we had an absolutely fantastic panel. We had some fantastic networking. I think what really struck me about this event in particular, and it was actually the fourth event we've done in this sort of sub thread of London Tech Leaders events that's focused specifically on women. Is that everyone was just really, really locked into and engaged with the content. I think our events are all characterized in different ways. Some have this real levity and everyone's kind of laughing and giggling, and some are a little bit more serious. And this was very much, really strong engagement with the content from our audience. So that was absolutely fantastic. And I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time with other ladies in the London Tech Leaders Advisor Group in the morning. So it was a great way to kind of a midweek celebration ahead of International Women's Day, which, as you said, was yesterday.
Nice. And so let's just touch on International Women's Day a little bit. I've noticed through my powers of observation that you are a woman, Sophie, right? So, don't deny it. It's true. How did what did you do for International Women's Day? How did you celebrate? Or did you celebrate? Is it all a bit passé for you? Where are you on it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think for me, it's one of those with all of these events, and we have, Black History Month and we have Pride Month and all of these things that, we don't want to be celebrating particular demographics of people for just one day or 1 week or 1 month a year. But when we recognize, various imbalance or underrepresentation in society, it's nice to have an occasion to remind ourselves. As every year, I think a lot of women who are sort of working in businesses and technology find that we have these, kind of breakfasts and these events that come around International Women's Day every year, and they're great fun, and it's amazing to connect with women friends, old and new, from across the sector. For me, International Women's Day is all about the really little personal things. So my favorite thing I ever did on an International Women's Day was I built a bed for my friend. And if that's not women supporting women, I don't know what is.
Right.
And this year I had a couple of small celebrations. I did a park run with my sister, and I was absolutely exhausted, but she kind of helped me finish and kind of get across the line before she did. And then in return, I helped her pack for a work trip and lent her a bunch of clothes. And it's really those kind of like micro women supporting women, lifting each other up. That is what International Women's Day is to me.
Kind of the everyday stuff, right?
The everyday stuff.
Yeah, always there. And I've definitely, on the fabulous LinkedIn, which we all spend our life scrolling on, right? I've definitely seen a bit of a different trend this year, where us men, we're all scared shitless of this stuff, right? We just say nice stuff about our female colleagues and hope that nobody asks too many different questions, right? But that's a joke. But actually, you get a lot of, capable women who've got platforms or voice, whatever, coming on and saying stuff. This year, I've just noticed something. You sort of said this a little bit more, like it shouldn't just be about this one day, right? It's not all about this one day sort of thing. And there were several people who were like, I do this all year round. I celebrate women, I support women, I uplift women, I do it all year round in a way, men as well. We know about the men, right? But yeah, and I thought, actually, I hope we're getting to that. I hope we're getting to where it's a bit more normal. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have International Women's Day, but it'd be nice if we didn't feel like we had to have it, and not everybody felt like they had to put a message up about something brilliant about women on that day, right? And actually, that just kind of happened the world round all the time, right?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I think there's much more nuance we can introduce to these events. I did an interview as part of the work I do in the kind of neurotechnology space with a fantastic woman called Elise Jenkins. She's co-founder of this amazing neurotechnology company, and they're basically monitoring electrical activity in the brain to track and maybe one day treat cancer.
Wow.
And we did this interview, and we kind of put it out around International Women's Day to talk about all of the really cool stuff she's doing. And it's such a different approach to a lot of panels. You'll kind of see a woman who's invited, and they say, so what's it like to be a woman working in tech? Go, well, that's a bit of a benign question. Why don't you ask me about the cool stuff I'm doing? And it's not because I'm a woman that I'm doing it, but I don't normally get lifted up in the same way as my male counterparts. So let's have that as our opportunity. So I do think there's this kind of evolution towards every day is International Everyone's Day, and making sure that we're being a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit less tokenistic about how we celebrate people from different backgrounds.
Agree. Well, I'm glad whatever you did out there, man or woman, to celebrate International Women's Day. Hopefully it was good and positive and worthwhile. But let's talk about things coming up for everybody and anybody. The Evolving CTO Mandate event from London Tech Leaders on Wednesday, the 25th of March. This is always a popular annual one where we focus in on the CTO role, CIO, tech leader role, and work out what's happening to it and what's involved. And it seems like every year it changes. It seems like every year it gets a little bit more nuanced or specific or whatever sort of thing. And I know that we're gonna have a chat about this later on in the podcast, Sophie. So let's leave it for doing that. But yeah, that's coming up Wednesday, 25th of March. Through all the normal channels, get you sign up for that and make sure we see you there.
We've got quite a few things that have been happening in the news. I would love to kick off with a really quick update on this Pentagon and Anthropic debacle. So I've been watching this fairly closely, and I'd like to keep you up to date with the latest, David. So as we discussed last week when Sam was here, but I'm sure you've been watching from a distance of everything that was happening in the news. And I'm sure you listened to the podcast, of course. The recap is that Anthropic, who did have a contract with the Department of War, don't like that phrasing, Department of Defense, objected to the use of their kind of AGI technology in autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. And then in response to that, what has happened since we last spoke was that the Pentagon deemed them a supply chain risk, which basically means that they consider Anthropic or Claude is not secure enough for it to be used. And it's actually the first time that has happened to a US company. So that's a little bit of a landmark. And of course, in response, Anthropic is now challenging that in court. They don't feel that the Pentagon has a legal basis to give them this assignment. But also difficultly, and we've seen this in a few developments in the news recently, apparently Anthropic leadership thought that negotiations were moving forward. They were going really well until Trump tweeted on Truth Social saying that he was going to direct federal agencies not to use it. So that's that update on the sort of Anthropic Pentagon side. But there is a second side to the story. And the second side to this story is that OpenAI swooped in immediately after the sort of relationship broke down on the other side, and they agreed a deal with the Department of Defense. But they did it so quickly. They announced it on the Friday, I think, of last week. And then on Saturday, they said, it's a fantastic contract. It has more guardrails than any previous agreement for classified AI deployments, including Anthropic's agreement. But actually what happened is that Sam Altman came out afterwards and said, listen, I feel like we've been a little bit opportunistic and sloppy. And they are now objecting to use of their technology in a way that is sort of intentional use for domestic surveillance of US persons and nationals. So, there's a lot going on here, a lot of developments. And I think a lot of people, don't necessarily agree with this. We've seen that there's actually been a surge in the number of downloads and signups for Claude, and actually a surge in the number of uninstalls for ChatGPT. And of course, Caitlin Kalinowski, who was an employee at OpenAI, who interestingly used to lead the development of AR glasses at Meta, she actually quit the company saying, and this is a quote from her LinkedIn post, "AI has an important role in national security, but surveillance of Americans without judicial oversight and lethal autonomy without human authorization are lines that deserve more deliberation than they got." So, whether this announcement came out before that amendment that OpenAI introduced saying, we're not going to let them use it for domestic surveillance, is difficult to tell. But, clearly people want to say in how AI is used in defense. And this is something that's very likely exacerbated by very active geopolitical landscape at the moment and, multiple prominent conflicts worldwide. What are your thoughts on this, David?
I'm bored. I'm just
Yeah.
bored by the whole theatre of it, right? It's like, certain politicians in certain parts of the world standing up or tweeting or whatever it is on their own platforms, saying things like Anthropic or supply chain risk. It's like, if I was bought into Claude and I was using it as part of my business, do you think as a result of that I'm going to switch it off? Of course I'm bloody not, right? So I think I'm going to make my own judgment on that. And then Anthropic challenged it and said the government should just ignore it when they say stuff like that and get on with your business, get on with your life. So there's too much theatre, and it's like AI was meant to be this thing which, helped us in the world, solve lots of problems in the world, right? I know there are challenges that we've talked about them on these podcasts, right? But it just feels like the big boys are all just theatrical about this, and they're all making grandiose statements and stuff like that. It's like, look, get on with your technology, get on with you running the government, just get on with it, sort of thing, right? Make your policies, stand behind them, don't grandstand so much. That's where I am on this, Sophie. I'm a bit bored with it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I can see that. There does seem to be some sort of theatrics and certainly some politics to it, going from, well, you're not going to give us everything we want in a contract to, we've deemed you a supply chain risk, and you sort of hear about it because Trump has tweeted something on Truth Social. I mean, off of the back of International Women's Day, people say, women can't be leaders. They're way too emotional. But, I think I see some people throwing some hissy fits out in public.
Very good point there. I like that, Sophie.
So we have some more news as well. We have some news around Meta smart glasses. And one thing that we had discussed last time we, had this podcast together, David, was that we wanted to have a more human angle of, how technology is interacting with your man or woman or, genders in between on the street. Has this come across your newsfeed, this sort of smart glasses controversy?
Yeah, actually, this is about what you can see through the smart glasses, right? Now, initially, I got this a little bit wrong, and I was like, because they were going, oh, people can use it whilst they're, on the toilet or they're having sex or something like that. And I'm like, well, it's your own glasses. What does it matter? You wear your glasses where you want to wear your glasses. I mean, I'm wearing glasses now, and I was in the toilet 10 minutes ago. Big deal, something, right? But then I realized this is about actual people being able to see what people are seeing. So this is like snooping through smart glasses, right? Sort of thing. And this is like, oh my God, now this is getting a little bit serious, right? Sort of thing. And you're going to get people like taking off their glasses for activities in case the data leaks into, somebody else's sphere or something, sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, it feels like they'll probably just tighten up the security immediately on it, and it won't be a problem tomorrow. So I think it's probably a sensationalist story, but it does bring the human element, which is, if you're doing wearables, and we've talked about wearables before, if you're doing wearables, well, they go where you go as a human, right? So I think so. They hear everything you say, they see everything you do. Yeah, be a bit careful, I would say, when you're wearing them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of the wearables, briefly excluding smart glasses, and I know we had, kind of Google glasses from years ago that didn't really take off. I have a Whoop, for example, and there's certain data that it has on it, but it doesn't feel nearly as sensitive as a kind of live stream of seeing what I'm seeing throughout my daily life, kind of having my heart rate and my steps and things like that. But the thing that really interested me about this particular piece of news was that, it didn't seem to be that it's a security feature. So if they said, listen, we need to make sure that we can catch criminals who are doing something bad or whatever it might be, we want to protect the public. And for that, we are occasionally going to look at the videos that are recorded through these smart glasses. it feels a little bit more justifiable than what they did say, which was it's for improving the user experience. And so what they're actually doing is they're sending these videos to these kind of third-party contractors in countries all across the world. And there's supposed to be this kind of filtering of the videos to hide people's faces. But these third-party contractors have kind of come out and spoken to the news and said, I've seen people on the toilet. I've seen people having sex. I've seen all of these different things. I've seen naked bodies. And this filtering doesn't work. As always, Meta have turned around and said, well, as stated in our privacy policy, as if anyone actually reads the privacy policy in that much detail. So I agree with you. I think this is a little bit concerning for technology that is so, it's kind of so close to an individual and who they are and their experience.
And I think they'll tighten the whole thing up. They'll tighten their policies or what people can see, or they'll do the technology. But yeah, I suppose there's an omelette and eggs thing here, right? We are trying to move forward on this technology. Something's always going to happen. If you're an early adopter, I don't know about you, but I love a gadget. I'm always an early adopter on stuff, right? You roll with the punches, right, sort of thing. And if it's to improve user experience, well, I'm sure somebody will let me have notes on how I go to the toilet safely. So that'll be fun. Okay. What else we got?
So we have got another piece, and actually this is the first time. I think a lot of the topics that we talk about here is we want to maximize privacy, and this is what we were talking about just now. We don't want people watching our videos from our sort of smart glasses. Well, what if that comes with a trade-off? So what has been in the news this week is that TikTok has decided not to implement end-to-end encryption and messages because it makes users safer. So everyone will be familiar with end-to-end encryption, which is the kind of technology you have across WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, messaging on Instagram, X, all of these. And the objective is to maximize user privacy. And all of the companies that make these technologies say, we prioritize end-to-end encryption because we are prioritizing user privacy. But what TikTok is saying is that if you have this end-to-end encryption, it actually makes it really hard to stop harmful content spreading online because you can't actually see what people are sending in the messages, whether that's, text or videos or pictures. And it means that the tech firms themselves, as well as law enforcement organizations, don't actually have any way of viewing material sent in direct messages that could be affiliated with, crime or harm more broadly. So it's kind of this deliberate strategy by TikTok to kind of prioritize safety at the cost of privacy. And so it's the first time that I've really seen those two kind of, there's supposed to be benefits for your person on the street using the technology. But it's a really clear example of how they're pitted together. And I think the only example I could come across that was a little bit more nuanced was Telegram, which says that end-to-end encryption is, you can sort of opt into it, but it's not a default. So how do you feel, David? Do you prefer safety or privacy on your messaging platforms?
So I have to take this with a little pinch of salt, bearing in mind who the owners of TikTok are, but and why they might want to look at other people's information. But I'm okay if there's a company who's saying, look, we're trying to safeguard you a little bit, right? We're trying to sort of, get rid of unwanted stuff, right? Given some of the other stories we've had about harm coming from online services, et cetera, I'm kind of okay with that. But that's because I'm also one of these boring, sort of people who sits in the mid zone of like, I haven't got anything that I don't want people to see, sort of thing. I haven't got anything to secure and stuff, and I'm not stupid enough to put my bank account details, on an open, unencrypted message, right? Sort of thing. But I don't know, I think people will make assumptions, right? So if they're using WhatsApp, which is end-to-end encrypted, they'll think, well, I put that kind of data on WhatsApp safely and securely. Then they'll go to TikTok and they'll just think, oh, it's just another internet-y thing. So it could get confusing. I'm not saying everybody has to do the same, but it could get confusing about, well, which one is encrypted? And that could lead to accidents of people oversharing information that they wanted to keep a bit more private, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I vote for safeguarding over privacy in this particular domain, I think.
I think I do. I think I agree with you that it's useful to have options. There are some bits that you might really, really want to keep private. And if you know where to go to do that and the product has, sufficient signposting to help you understand, then that's fantastic. But I do, if I had teenage kids and they were on a platform that said, we're actually doing everything we can do to minimize harmful content spreading, that's definitely the platform I would encourage them to use.
Exactly. I think so. Now, talking about spreading information, one of the news stories that I did pick up on is the new ads feature that X have added. It probably will be everywhere else soon as well. But this is basically where if a user posts and they reference a particular product, service, or whatever, that an ad will appear at the bottom of that link, at the bottom of that post. And the example that was given was somebody posted and said, "Get Starlink. It works great in Portugal. I get 350 megabits, blah, 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 blah," all that kind of stuff. And then at the bottom of it was a link to Get Starlink, which you could click on and it would take you off, sort of thing. And I think it confused some people because people like, "Sorry, are you getting paid to put this up?" and stuff like that, sort of thing. And I quite like it because I'm the guy who likes, like, when I've been even talking these days about getting a new lawnmower, I like the fact that the next 10 websites I visit offer me new lawnmowers because it stimulates me to. I like that sort of thing. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't like it. It's targeting me," and stuff like. So I'm quite a fan of the whole, like, if somebody says, "Hey, I've seen this great lawnmower," that I quite like a link to the lawnmower. It cuts time out, right, sort of thing. But I know a lot of people will see this as like, "Oh, everything's selling. I can't just do something for enjoyment. Now I've got to be sold and marketed to and all that kind of stuff." So where do you sit on this, Sophie?
I very much sit on the end that you've described. I think that I use Instagram a lot for shopping, and all you have to do, say I've been trying to buy some furniture for my house recently, say I'm looking for a coffee table, you just wait for an advert for a coffee table to come up, engage with it a little bit, and then immediately you have coffee table after coffee table after coffee table, and it's fantastic because you kind of, it's like a personal shopper that comes to you and says, alongside all of the silly content of like a little rabbit doing something funny, here's another coffee table. Do you like this one? So the responsiveness of the algorithm I find incredibly useful. The one thing that annoys me is when you buy something and then you still get the adverts and you're like, missed your trick, don't need to look at this anymore. But I do.
That's the thing. You need to just say not relevant anymore, right?
Yes, exactly. There you go. So I think the thing that's interesting about this, I mean, anyone who's worked in a B2C company will know that referrals are like gold dust. That's really the way that you kind of sell your products, by someone else, a real human being, saying, "Actually, it was fantastic. You can trust me." And I think often, when we're looking for recommendations, we do ask our friends, "Do you have one of these? Do you have this lawnmower? Is it any good?" Obviously, the risk here, and the interesting thing is that they have said, and it's a very new feature that's just being tested at the moment, they've said that they're not going to add affiliate links, which is obviously connecting much more to the kind of revenue generation. I'm not really recommending it, but I am recommending it so that I can get a bit of money if you click on the link. They're not including that. But there is a softer version of, people just spinning up accounts on X and saying, "Oh, Starlink's fantastic," and they're being paid in the background, even if they don't have an affiliate link. So I think it could be fantastic. But I do think there's a risk that it gets used in a way that is just,
TripAdvisor reviews and all of that kind of stuff, isn't it? It's I don't know. Are we all getting a bit wise to that now? Maybe we're getting a bit wise. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So as you said, Sophie, we were trying to get into some more human connection stuff, right? So I think we've traversed that with the Meta glasses and a bit of TikTok and ads and stuff like that. I think we're heading in that direction. But I really wanted to dive deep on this, so I did a little bit of Googling and said, "Come on, there must be some stuff out there." And after I'd waded through all of the AI this, AI that, etc., I got down to robots. Now, we all know that the robots are being driven by AI these days, so there's a little bit of AI hidden under the hood, right? But I found this great story all about how robots are helping humans at work and in their day-to-day lives. I shared it with you. What do you think about this?
I think it's fascinating. So this article, it's got 9 or so different use cases of kind of robots, how robots are doing cool things for human beings. I think my favorite that I saw on the list, I've done a little bit of work in this area previously, is robotics in social care. So as we know, there is a massive challenge. The number of, older individuals who require care, elderly care, is absolutely growing. And our workforce capacity to support them is not going to be able to scale at the same rate. So people are looking to technology and robotics to support them, which I think it's fantastic in terms of scalability, but actually the engineering challenges and the sort of socio-psychological challenges are really significant. So to tell you a bit about the work that I did years ago, I worked on a study at Bristol University for a number of months. Well, the only thing we were looking at was when you pass a cup between a robot hand and a human being, how do you design that? How can you tell when they've sort of accepted the cup? Like my dad, for example, whenever he hands you a cup, he'll go, have you got it? Have you got it? Have you got it? He's terrified of something being spilt on the carpet.
Okay.
So building kind of systems that actually interact with people in an effective way. And, they're sort of not just flinging your dinner all over the place. But importantly, we also were looking at the sort of emotional facial expressions that robots should show for people engaging with them to feel like there's someone there. Because, yes, we can absolutely go in and we can help make sure people are they've got tidy homes and they're clean and they're fed, but that doesn't support the sort of emotional aspect and the potential loneliness
Right.
that comes with care for older individuals. So I think it's a great opportunity, but I think there's definitely nuance in the way it should be approached.
Yeah, and also I think there's a lot of generated content out there with robots doing amazing things. Yeah, and my sort of is it true thing is whether or not it looks like more like a human, and its subtlety in the way it moves and everything is being done right. So on this story, the robotics in social care, which you were sort of just talking about, you go and there's a picture there, and there's these very square, non-human looking robots with chunky sort of grabbers like this, grabbing a pin and turning it around. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually true. They're real, because nobody would create them from virtual reality, right? Or from artificial intelligence, right? You just wouldn't. That's not the design of robot that you'd sign off on and put in an article. But so I do sort of want the ones that we're seeing that are a bit more fictional. I want these hands to be a bit more nimble, as you say, at grabbing stuff and picking up stuff, right? So hopefully your research there will pay dividends. But yeah, there's some great stuff going on here. And the one that really surprised me was that you can't go and Google this for our listeners out there. Soft robots for tight spots. Now, we all think of robots and we, like exterminate, all that kind of stuff, right? But this is a robot that is described as the consistency of custard. And it basically has been mixed with magnetic particles that can be moved and controlled using external magnets, right? And because it's soft, the slime can squeeze through narrow spaces with a 1.5 millimeter diameter and grasp solid objects by wrapping around them. This has all sorts of things from, I'm just thinking about very human stuff. Like, what if I swallowed something? It would be great for just popping down and going, sorry, can you go and get that thing I accidentally swallowed I shouldn't have had, right? What about picking up my car keys when I drop them down the drain, right? That'd be excellent, right? Just pop down the drain to get my car keys, or when you've dropped your telephone, it's gone under the car seat and you can't get to it. So to this week's highlight by David Crawford is soft robots for tight spots. That's the quote. That's the headline for the podcast this week. What do you think of it?
Love it. I love it so much. No, I think it's fantastic. It's like flubber, but useful. No, I think, there you go. I don't know if it's green, actually. You said it was custard consistency, but I don't know if it's custard.
Yeah, the one on there is sort of a black color, but I'm guessing, you could probably have it customized, Sophie.
Yeah, I think so. No, I think this is fantastic. I think there's a lot that can be unlocked by materials science. And actually, for some work I do in the neurotechnology world, I published another article last week that was about brain chips that are nanoparticles, and you insert them as a nasal spray. So imagine that, currently you need a big surgery because your brain chip's about this big and it needs to be implanted. But actually just having a nasal spray and all of a sudden you have a Neuralink or something in that direction. So I'm really, really excited by these kind of like soft materials, soft robotics, and the form factors that they're going to unlock. And as you've said, the functionalities that they're going to unlock. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's great. And also just slightly redefines the way in which we think about robots, right?
Yes, absolutely. So our last piece of news this week, going back to our sort of silliest tech news of the week. David, have you seen Lenovo's, it's Wally, basically. Have you seen this?
I haven't really, but I've heard about it a little bit, right?
Okay.
I quite liked Wally, the film Wally. It was quite cute sort of thing. Do I want him sitting on my desktop the whole time? I'm not sure about that.
It's a good point. I mean, it was a fantastic film. I don't know if he was the most capable of robots, but no. So this news here is that Lenovo have made this kind of Wall-E style robot, and it's a kind of AI workmate concept, and it's pretty cute, also a little bit creepy, and it's very much a proof of concept. So it's not something that you can kind of really buy at the moment, or we don't have a strong understanding of the functionalities. But the objective is that it sort of sits on your desk and it aids you with productivity by kind of watching you work and giving input and it has multimodal input itself. So you can kind of interact with projections it creates onto your sort of desk space. And obviously it's powered by AI. But it just has some really cute googly eyes. And it's like a real life version of Microsoft's Clippy. And I just had to bring it up. And I will encourage all of our listeners, if you haven't seen him, go and Google him. If you type in Lenovo's Wally, he will come up, and he looks cute. I want to.
Should we get one? Let's get one.
Let's get one.
Then have it and maybe they could take over from us as podcast presenters, Sophie. You and I could just go down the pub and they could sit here talking about stuff we talk about. Right? That sounds like
fantastic. Love it.
Okay, well, listen, that was the week of news. Thank you very much. Some bit more human stuff in there. If there's stuff that our listeners want us to go and have a look at and talk about and get into a bit, let us know. Send us some links. We'll go and have a look at that. Otherwise, we'll continue to bring you the world of technology news as we go forward. Right. So we're now going to talk, we haven't got a guest this week, but we're going to talk about what's coming up, the kind of topics coming up at the London Tech Leaders event on the 25th of March with the evolving CTO mandate. So I'm the CTO, CIO, technology leader. Sophie, you come more from the product world, but you've got good technology chops. And this is really about how the CTO role has evolved over time, right? So I don't know, is it worth us starting by saying what the CTO role kind of has been for a while, and then where it's going? Is that kind of useful?
Yeah, I think that's a really good starting point. And David, you've been a CTO in many different situations, or as you say, CIO, or these kind of different C titles that are becoming not synonymous, but they're kind of clumping together a little bit, like our gloopy robot that's going to hold everything together in one go. So I think what would be interesting in light of ahead of our discussion later this month on the 25th for our London Tech Leaders events, where we will be talking about, how is it evolving, to understand what was being a CTO like back before we had all of this boom of kind of AI or these recent trends coming in. What was your experience of maybe your first CTO role?
Yeah, so, well, my first CTO role, I've talked a little bit about this before, was a bit of a baptism of fire. I literally kind of landed the CTO role quite suddenly. And I think that there's always that transition from, you don't become an engineer and then become a CTO. There's always a few layers in between, maybe a manager, head of, a director, something like that, sort of thing. And so you learn to become more of a leader throughout that time. So it's not often big bang, but it depends on the size of organization. If it's a small organization, you can be a hired engineer the next day and then suddenly the CTO, right? And that's the way it can happen, right? But I think, 10 years ago, I don't know, even 5 years ago, the CTO still probably wasn't much in the boardroom, right? In some very large companies, perhaps, but not much in the boardroom. Still lots of sort of reporting through the chief finance officer or the COO or something like that. And a lot of the work was IT, right? Or building software. Yeah. And you got some requirements, whether that was, enterprise requirements or whether that was, a product set of requirements. And I think that we've been busy, and you'll understand this through your journey, Sophie, we've been busy as CTOs, particularly in the product development space, over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years, really honing that how do we get software, how do we get product out the door, software-based product out the door, how do we do it, how do we all align, how do we make sure we don't have scope creep, budget creep, time creep, all of that kind of stuff, yeah? And I think we got good at that. The trouble is that the technology moves on, and I'll come to AI in a minute, but the technology has moved on at such a rapid pace, and I think CTOs have been sort of focused on their teams and how to get, high-performing teams who produce product and stuff like that, that they've maybe a few years ago had lost the art of facing into the executive team, the team mission, the company mission, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's what we've been focused on in the last few years, is correcting that, getting back to the boardroom and becoming, that strategic CTO role. And I think that's what's become much more important over time. And again, from a skill set point of view, traversing from being an operational CTO into a strategic CTO, that takes a different skill set, a different mindset, a different approach. So I think that's something that we've seen change over the last few years. And then AI hits us, right? And I'm on record as saying 3 years ago, I was like, oh, I don't think I'll need to get across this AI stuff. It all feels very, very techy and very, I'm a strategic CTO. I probably, and 9 months into that, I was like, shit, I've got to get across this. It's going to be important, right? So I think so. So it doesn't really matter what level of CTO you are. You're always having to evolve your skills. Yeah. Now I don't code anymore. Nobody wants that. I was never good at it to start with, right? But I have focused the last sort of 7, 8, 9 years on being a strategic technology leader. Yeah? And I focus on good leadership, getting a good team in place, developing them, bringing them on. I focus on stakeholder engagement and working with the stakeholders so that they understand what's getting, whether that's product from a development point of view or whether that's enterprise IT and providing internal stakeholders with enterprise systems. Really having good stakeholder relationships and understanding what's needed there, inside a business is important. And then the third thing is strategy. Right, that's understanding what the business is trying to achieve and getting to the point where you're not just the little IT guys in the corner, but you're actually sort of focused on delivering value to the business and making sure that that's aligned with whatever the goals are, whether they're growth, whether they're efficiency. It doesn't really matter, right? But just being aligned with those, and that's a really strategic thing. And I find that actually, and I think you'll hear this from some of the people that we've got speaking at the London Tech Leaders event in a couple of weeks' time. It means that sometimes these CTOs are feeling less technical, right? They're feeling further away, not necessarily personally less technical, but in their role, they're feeling further away from the technology. And in fact, I spend a lot of my time these days, not thinking about the tech, but thinking about the application within the business or the business, strategy or how marketing is perceiving, AI usage in its strategy and it's about strategy and alignment much more. And quite often the technology is just sort of a couple of layers down from me. You have to have good people in place to do that, and you have to trust them. But yeah, so I do think that the role has become strategic.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think what we're seeing with the evolution of technology nowadays, AI being one example, quantum perhaps the one that's around the corner, that you do have this natural opportunity for organizations to embrace technology. Everyone's doing it. If you don't do it, then you're really going to lose the race, which is why you see this progression from, a little IT person in the corner to being a leading strategic partner in an organization. And you really have a bigger slice of the pie when it comes to the organization's mission and a bigger opportunity to have positive impact, which is why you need to be so much more strategic than you used to be. And certainly this is my experience in the product world and why I really love product, because to me, it's kind of the core of what we're doing as an organization. Obviously, that's not true for every organization. I've worked for healthcare companies where product is kind of on the side. But, it's always an opportunity with kind of digital and software and technology. But the second thing that struck me from what you mentioned is a lot of the, maybe 2 out of the 3 aspects you touched on seem to align with these, I think, what are typically called soft skills. We tried to rebrand them actually at the Women Plus Tech Leaders event last week to human skills.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, can you code fantastically anymore, but how do you really genuinely understand the organization you're working in, both so you can get the most out of your teams, but so whatever you do get out of your teams is, aligned and it's well integrated across the organization. So everything you've said really, really echoes with conversations I've been having recently.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I think one of the other things that comes as a sort of a byproduct of becoming a more strategic C-suite leader, especially if you've done that in a few places and sort of built up your executive level experience, is that sometimes you find yourself in a situation where your fellow C-suite executives in other disciplines aren't as experienced as you in being in the C-suite, right? Maybe don't have as strategic thinking as you. Maybe they've come up through the ranks and are still sort of more in the great doers and getting their strategic thing on, right? I've found this a couple of times where I've been, and my approach to that is always to go, well, I might be able to help here, right? I might be able to lend some of my sort of experience of working with other C-suite teams and help us all move forward together. Now, the trouble is that feels very strange for the IT guy to be doing that, right? It just, it doesn't, you haven't quite got the right label there to do that, sort of thing. Suddenly the IT guy is what? Coaching the sales and marketing officer on how to how to position themselves in an exec meeting. That just feels wrong. But it's something that, because I believe in leadership of any flavor, right? Something it doesn't have to just be technology focused me. And actually, as I've declared time and time again, I've sort of, I don't know everything about technology, but I've been doing this bit I like to look left and right of technology a bit, right? So I'm really interested in finance and marketing and sales and operations and all of those kind of things. And I've seen it done well and I've seen it done badly. So sharing that as a strategic C-suite leader, even though I'm the techie in the room, I like to do that. Because it helps us all on the mission. It gets different reactions, I can tell you, because a lot of people still see the old IT stamp on the forehead, right? And think, why is this guy telling me how to be an effective leader or something? So I don't tell people how to be an effective leader, right? But you end up working, and when it works, and when you all come together and share your various experiences at leadership, I think that can really go well. But that's an interesting byproduct that I found. As more technology leaders are in the C-suite, they're becoming more experienced at being in the C-suite and able to share that with some less experience, regardless of the discipline.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do think there are skills that we develop in the kind of tech and product sides of organizations that can benefit other parts of the organization. And of course, it's harder when you have this kind of opaque, we don't really know what IT does. We have a bunch of people and they tick-tack away at their laptops, and then eventually some software or whatever it is pops out the other end. But I think particularly in, agile ways of working, multi-stakeholder ways of working, there are lots of these transferable skills that can offer benefit across an organization. So it really makes sense. I have a question for you, actually, David, because you mentioned something just now about, as a CTO now, you're being strategic, you're thinking about stakeholders and kind of, different objectives for the organizations and how to align what you're doing, making sure you do it really well within your teams to those objectives. And that sort of separates you slightly from the technical, potentially reality of the team. And, we've all sat down with a CEO who said, AI, make it happen. And you go, well, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that sometimes. What do you think are the downsides of being separated from the technical side? Do you think you need to extra kind of invest and double down on having a fantastic team a couple of levels down that you can really rely on? Do you think there's a risk that you might encourage the team to build something that technically you don't really understand as a leader? What do you think about that?
So this is maths for me, right? Call it maths, call it table stakes, call it whatever, right? This is a question that answers itself if you look at the structure of organizations, right? I didn't just wake up one day and I was like a CIO, CTO, right? That's not how that happened, right? I came up through the ranks. I had, and I moved a little bit within that. And, I started life as a developer, an engineer, and then I did a little bit of technical project management, and then I sideways into sort of business requirements. I was a database architect at one point. I did a variety of things. And then as I got up, and manager got added to my title, and then department head and all of that kind of stuff. You sort of went across that path. I know that every single one of those roles that I held, and the peers around those levels of roles, and the teams around those heads of and et cetera, were all essential to the whole vision, right? The thigh bone's connected to the knee bone, et cetera, right? So I think, and so from that, is that a good analogy? Maybe it's not. Anyway, the point is that I really understand the value of having the right people with the right skill sets and the right experience in the right place in the organization. And as a strategic leader, it's my job to make sure that they're there, right? And when they are there, then I can trust them to do the job, because I know that that's the right organizational structure for our mission, journey, whatever, right? Sort of thing. And so in its simplest form, because people get really worried about the word strategy. They get really scared about it. It's like strategy, something. And no end of times I've said to people, oh, could you just put a strategy together around that for me? And they come back and they've got a plan or a list of tasks or whatever, right? And just like, yeah, that's not really a strategy. And then they've gone away and said, turn this plan into a strategy with ChatGPT or something, right? So and it's like, actually, I think we just get too scared of strategy. I think what we should do, Sophie, is and I'm always having bright ideas in the middle of our podcast, right? We should get somebody who's a strategy expert to come on and explain what strategy actually is to us, right? How should leaders think about strategy? Because I think, we bang on us strategic leaders, bang on about strategies as the be all and end all. And actually, people don't really know what it is, and they're a bit scared by it. And it's not quite a plan, and it's got a little bit of money involved in it. And you have to think about people, but there's some goals or something, and it's like, it's a bit scary. Yeah, I actually think it's really simple once you get it together. And having people beneath you, as you were asking, who can do the day job and are trusted because they've got the right level of skills and experience at that point in the organization is essential for you to be able to do the strategic job. So they both feed each other, Sophie. That's my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know, actually, in a serendipitous integration of events, the day that you and I met, David, which was the first London Tech Leaders panel that I spoke on back in 2024 at this point, we were talking about AI, but the keynote that preceded us was Rachel Caldicott, who at the time, at least, I think she was an executive director at Careful AI. She spoke about what strategy is, and something she said has stuck with me ever since. And I say it to anyone who listens. So a strategy is something you can, a sort of approach is a very broad term, but it's something you can say. And if you invert it and the inversion isn't stupid, it's a strategy. So if you say, my strategy is to become the biggest and best and most successful company, and you invert it, my strategy is to become the worst and most terrible and an awful company, it's stupid. It's not a strategy. If you say, well, my strategy is to become the best, but here's how I'm going to do it. This is the particular kind of approach I'm going to take. And it leverages all of my, my organization's individual kind of opportunities and benefits that make sense for us. And you turn it on your head and go, okay, well, the one that you turn on your head, it's not stupid. It just doesn't fit your organization necessarily. That's a strategy. Yeah. So maybe we should bring Rachel back on to kind of recap for
Let's
us
get Rachel.
What a strategy means.
Rachel, hello, Rachel. You're on. Go on, get in here. We'd like that. That'll be good. I think we should definitely descale it. But my talking about moments that stuck with you. My moment where I determined I was going to become a strategic leader, and I'm not sure I realized why I needed to be, right, was actually stimulated by me not getting a job, right? So I was working with a company. This is several years ago, and I was in the role of CTO, but it was an interim role. And they decided that they wanted to make the role perm, towards the end of the thing. And they said, well, look, it'd be great. And the CEO was really enthusiastic. I got a good relationship. He said, you should definitely apply, and we'll, take you through the process, all that kind of stuff. It was an extensive process. It was for a private equity company at the time, right? And I went through it all, and they came and they found me afterwards, and they said, great, good interviews, good submissions, all that kind of stuff, sort of thing. And of course, we know the work you've been doing with us, right? Sort of thing. And then the guy sat down, nice guy, very, very calmly mannered, and he sat down and he talked me through it. And he said, here's why we're not going to give you the role. And I said, go on. And he said, if this building were on fire, or there was an earthquake, or we were under attack, he said, every single person in this building would look to you as to how to successfully navigate them to safety. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm great, brilliant, sort of thing. Right? He felt like he was tickling my ego, right? And he said, you are a fantastic operational leader, no doubt about it whatsoever. He said, but if somebody said this building was going to fall down or be under attack in a year's time, said people wouldn't look to you to how to avoid that. And I was like, oh, and it really hit me. Right? I wasn't angry with him, but it made me angry. I was offended. I was upset. I was just like, and he was basically explaining that I was good operationally as a leader. I wasn't good strategically as a leader. And so I actually did go and invest an amount of time and energy in finding out what strategy meant and how to be a strategic leader and how to tune into that. And I think some of what we can do here, and if we bring on somebody like Rachel, we can help fast path that for people. But, it's important. It doesn't mean you're not good at being one kind of leader, right? But I think the evolving CTO, CIO tech leader today, I think it's much more about strategy than it is about being operational. I think people, you'll have people in your team who are operational, depending on the size of your organization. I'm now going to get barraged by people saying, I'm everything for everybody. It's like, great, put on your underpants on the outside of your trousers, wear your cloak, go ahead. But if you're in an enterprise, that's probably the wrong outfit, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about this a lot more at our event on the 25th of March. And one of the first kind of topics of discussion is being strategic now the most important part of the CTO role. So I think we know where you stand, and we'll be hearing from our panelists on their perspectives. And we'll also have an opportunity to talk about, data coming into this CTO role. Is it sort of CTIO with a P in there somewhere? Also about, the impact that AI is having, which you and I have touched on, but, keen to talk about non-AI things as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think the final topic is like, what are the kind of emerging skills or responsibilities that will be non-negotiable for all CTOs in the next 2 to 3 years? So being strategic, it sounds like it's one of them. Making sure you can build a really robust team that you can rely on to be operational operational and to know about the technology, but understanding business objectives and being able to understand your stakeholder ecosystem. So I think these are all things that are going to come up. So if you haven't already signed up for an event, I would really recommend it. I think we've got some spaces left, but it's always a fantastic evening.
I'm going to make a prediction. Somebody at the event is going to say a future skill for a senior technology leader is to think like a CEO, right? Because I think that for me is what we're seeing. I think we're seeing, sort of engineers who have become CTOs. Then we're seeing operational CTOs, as I was describing, I previously was. Then we're seeing them morph into, as they get closer to the business understanding, into strategic CTOs and CIOs. And then the next step is being the CEO. And we know, we've had somebody on here talking about it, that we do flip from CTO to CEO. That tends to be in a technology business, right? That tends to be the natural growth. I think that, given the use of digital technology in every business nowadays, actually thinking like a CEO is the next desirable skill for the technology C-suite contender. You heard it here first, Sophie. Let's see if it comes up at the event in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I will take that bet with you. And on my side, I will buy you a pint if you're correct. And I would like you to buy me a pint if human skills is the one that comes up, which is probably the CEO as well. But anyway, deal.
Sophie, shall we do the mid-episode game? Do you fancy doing a bit of that?
Yeah, this is one of those questions where I know I have to say yes, but every cell in my body is screaming, no, God damn it, I don't want to do the mid-episode game. I will not be taken to school again by you and your proxies, even when you're not here, you win. No, let's do it.
I was ill for a couple of days last week, Sophie. You got me at a vulnerable stage. This could be your moment. You could come in and just swoop down, right? Let's get the Quizmeister extraordinaire on. I think Will is our Quizmeister extraordinaire this week. Will, are you there in the ether?
And we sit silently and wait for him to join. There we go. Hey, Will.
Hello, how are we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Welcome back, David. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Well, nice to see you. Hopefully you got a good midweek episode. I don't say mid-episode quiz lined up for us.
Yes. Hopefully, yeah. Luke is away. He was due to go to Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it because of the upset in Doha. That was his mid change for the flight. So he's actually gone to Costa Rica. So he's in Costa Rica for 2 weeks, which will be nice. Hopefully,
just put it around. Why not?
Yeah.
Have a young free and single. Well,
yeah. Anyhow, we are going to play a game this week called
Buzzword or Baloney.
So this week we are playing a game called Buzzword or Baloney. I'm going to read out a buzzword. It could be real, it could be made up, and you're going to guess whether it is real or not real. It's 1 point for each question. Again, as I have in the past, I've got 2 question sets. I'm going to ask David, given it's your week back, which question set you'd like to go for. And if you're happy with that, Sophie, I'll let David go first.
Well, I'm going to go B for baloney because actually, I don't know if you've ever had real baloney, but I quite like baloney. It is quite nice. I don't know how you describe it. I mean, I think it's American more than anything else, but it's a sort of it's like a hammy, spammy kind of concoction-y thing. Yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. It's baloney, basically. So that's why I'm going for it.
Interesting.
I have to do some more etymology on that word. Yeah, a bit more etymology. I'm not too sure what the background is, but we can find out.
Absolutely. Well, can I request some other etymology at my end? Because I thought you were making a football reference and saying, is it a buzzword or is it below the knee? On the assumption that there's a football something, or if you kick someone below the knee, that's like, it's a bad thing. Don't do that.
I want to be potentially a brain sometimes, Sophie, when they
I just don't watch football.
What's happening there?
Yeah, well, we'll find out. So you're going for question set 2, then that is B, I suppose, David. Yeah. So we'll kick off. So all you have to do is I'll read out a term or buzzword, as it were, and you just have to tell me if you think it is real or not real. So question 1 is serverless computing. Is that real or not real?
That's real.
Correct, it is. Serverless computing is a cloud model where the provider manages infrastructure dynamically. Despite the name, servers very much still exist. So well done.
That's the key, you see. There is no
Yeah.
such thing as serverless computing. It's just called serverless computing.
There we go. Very good. Okay, so that's 1 point so far. Question 2 is bimodal IT.
Bimodal IT. I'm going to say no.
That's incorrect, unfortunately. That is a real concept. It's a Gartner concept, actually, describing organizations running 2 separate IT delivery modes, one for stability and one for agility. Controversial, but real, apparently.
Well,
So that is...
Gartner there. I'm just going to put Gartner and leave that hanging there, right?
Yeah.
Gartner's got its own special lexicon all of its own, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, here we go. Question 3 is immutable infrastructure velocity mapping.
True.
That is untrue, unfortunately. That is not
Immutable
real.
infrastructure. I don't know about the velocity mapping bit. That sounded like baloney. But
Yeah. Yeah, that is unfortunately baloney. Maybe the first part, but the 4 words mapped together is unfortunately wrong. It's made up. It combines enough real terms to sound completely legitimate, but it is not. Okay, question 4. Question 4 is digital exhaust.
Digital exhaust. I mean, that sounds like baloney to me.
Unfortunately, it's not. It's real, apparently.
What is it?
This is the
Wow.
train of data passively generated by users as a byproduct of their digital activity. Think clicks, searches, and location pings.
Okay.
And that is digital exhaust.
Digital exhaust.
I think that's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's plenty more to come where that came from. So last question for your round, David. You are on 1 point so far. Is composable blockchain microservices mesh?
Composable blockchain microservices mesh. I mean, those 4 words mean something. Together, baloney.
Completely correct. Yeah, it is baloney. It's entirely invented, though it hits every buzzword bingo square going.
Exactly.
So you're right on that front. Well done. That was quite quite tough in some cases. So that's 2 points for you on that round, David.
Thank you.
So Sophie will come. Yeah, we'll come to you now, Sophie. So 2 to beat.
Let's go.
I have got a tiebreak question if you do end up getting 2 as well. So
Okay.
we'll see how it goes. Okay. Question set 1 for you, Sophie. The first word is quantum supremacy.
Oh, I think that's a thing, quantum supremacy. I mean, I don't know what it means, but I feel like I've heard it.
It is real. So quantum supremacy, it refers to the point at which a quantum computer can solve a problem that a classical computer practically cannot. Google claimed to achieve this in 2019.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah. Nice. So that's 1 point so far. Great work. Okay. Question 2 is cognitive mesh architecture.
Cognitive mesh architecture. So I can imagine what it would allude to, but the thing I'm thinking of is just like a neural network, and I think they would say neural network, so I'm going to say no, it's not real.
Correct. You are correct on that front. It's completely made up.
Well, good.
Yeah, it's completely made up. Though it sounds entirely plausible, which is the point, it is not real. Okay, question 3 is dark data.
Dark data. Well, I mean, I actually fundamentally disagree with the digital exhaust, which you said was real, because I think that's like product analytics to me anyway. But dark data, I'm going to say no, because data's just data.
Okay, dark data is real, actually. It's not baloney. So dark data is data that a company collects and stores but never actually uses or analyzes. A growing concern as storage costs drop and data volumes explode. So that is real.
Okay.
So you're on 2 points.
2 points there. Okay, let's go.
2 points. So you only need 1 more out of the next 2. Hyper automation.
I mean, like I can see some or many tech CEOs being like, we're not just automating with AI, we're gonna hyper automate. So the question just is, have they got that far of using that word yet? I'll say yes. I'm sure someone in Silicon Valley has said
it. You're right. You're correct. Yes, you have got 3 points. You obviously won this week, but we'll carry on in a minute. Yeah, so hyperautomation is, again, as David might just like this, is a Gartner coined term for combining multiple automation tools, AI, RPA, ML, etc., to automate as many processes as possible. It sounds like baloney, but it is very much a real thing.
Gartner sounds like baloney. I'm sure anybody's that phrase before.
Yeah.
I love Gartner for the record. I've used it many
Yeah.
times. You know.
I hope no Gartner listeners today, but
Yeah.
no, that's fine. Just messing. So, okay. So, last question, Sophie, see if you can get 4 out of 5. Is frictionless DevSecOps synergy?
Whoa.
No, that's the same as David's last one. That's just 4 words that each mean something, but if you put them together, then anything with synergy in it is baloney, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're completely correct. That is baloney. It's made up, though it's almost indistinguishable from real vendor marketing copy, which has a lot. It is baloney. So,
What's up now between friends there?
yeah. So yeah, well, Sophie, you've managed to pull it back from last week. You have won that round, or that this week, sorry, 4-2. So good job. Did you want to hear the tiebreaker question just out of interest? See if you can have a quick
Yeah,
guess
let's
on
do
those?
it.
Go on, give us a
Let's do it.
tiebreaker.
Okay, so the question for tiebreaker was, and this is a approximation from both of you, is how many apps are currently available on the Apple App Store to the nearest 100,000?
Ooh.
And that's
Oh,
one
wow.
answer each. So this is just a bit of fun and games.
Okay, I've got a figure in my head.
So have I.
Okay. So be honest with us. So what do you
Yeah.
think, David?
I think 145,538,000.
Okay. Sophie?
Mine was slightly rounder. I had 800,000.
Okay, well, you'd be closer then, because it's actually approximately 2.4 million on the Apple App Store.
Wow!
Yeah, I was
Wow.
surprised at that. I
I've
actually
got
thought it'd
more
be
than
more.
that on my phone.
Yeah, there's more on the Google Play Store, interestingly enough, but on the
Oh, really?
Apple Store, there's 2.4 million
They
approximately.
they must
Wow.
have told the one where the first app I ever downloaded on my first ever iPhone was the app where it flipped a coin. You see,
Okay.
you
I
go
had
like
that.
that with your phone, and it would flip a coin for you. And it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
that was definitely a piece of technology looking for a purpose. Right?
Oh,
Yeah. That
yeah.
sounds interesting. I
Oh,
remember
that's
one that I
amazing.
had. It was it imitated the sound of a razor. So when you press it against something, it would imitate the sound. So I remember various times at school pretending to cut someone's hair off. That was quite funny.
Oh my God. I love this. I think I had the razor one as well. I think I had,
Yeah.
and mine was definitely a product looking for a user. Was, if there was a thing this was years ago, but you would make a quip, you would say something like you would roast someone, and then you would go, and there was an app
Oh,
on your
yeah.
phone, and if you rotated it like this,
Yeah.
it would go. But it didn't
Really?
work because you would do a roast. You would roast someone. You would say something mean, and you go, just 2 seconds. I'm just going to, and then you would do it. Go, no, it's not. It's kind of like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took all of the jazz out of it.
Yeah,
Delayed
yeah.
roast. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Will. Well done, Sophie, for this
Thanks,
week.
Will.
Really good competition. Thank you. See you soon, Will. Bye.
No worries. See you later. Bye.
Always a good bit of fun, the mid-episode game. Well done, Sophie. You're catching up. Are we even Stevens, or are you still one behind? Or?
I think it might be 4 to you and 3 to me now. So
Okay.
next week we could be even.
We're getting
Stevens.
there. We're getting there. Okay, cool. Right.
All
What's
going
our
well.
disaster diary one for this week, Sophie?
Yes, yeah, I'm really excited to run through this one with you. And we did have a bit of a backlog because we haven't done this for a couple of weeks. And I think this one is probably the one that will help most people. So let me read it to you, and then I would love to know your thoughts. So, dear David and Sophie, I don't even know where to start. Always a fantastic beginning to a disaster diary. I'm a relatively new engineering manager, and my team is small but growing. Lately, things have been tense. 2 of our senior engineers just can't see eye to eye. Every discussion about architecture priorities or even bug fixes turns into a debate that feels personal. What frustrates me is that these debates are starting to leak into the wider team, slowing down progress and making others hesitant to speak up. I've tried giving them space to resolve things themselves, but it hasn't worked. They both think they're right, and honestly, neither seems willing to compromise. I don't have much experience handling interpersonal conflict, and I'm worried that if this continues, it will damage morale and maybe even make good people leave. What do you feel is the best course of action to resolve this?
Right. Well, this is quite a specific thing, but actually most managers and leaders at some point have had to deal with some variation of this. And we're not allowed to do duels anymore, are we? That's been outlawed, so it's not probably.
It's
I
harder now, yeah.
did use that early in my career, but I mean, it depends. This person sounds fairly desperate, but it depends how far it's gone for me, Sophie. Right? It always gets to a point where if something's not rescuable, then you have to go for drastic action. We'll talk about drastic action in a minute. But actually, it sounds like this person gone. I've tried to give them both their own space. The trouble is, space, in my opinion, just gives you time to consolidate your angry thoughts about stuff, right? And go, well, I am
Yeah.
right, and I'm not. Actually, I'd give them both a distraction rather than give them both space. I'd give them something meaningfully hairy, and not in competition. Maybe different ends of the project or the platform or whatever, right? So I think, and so that they're not necessarily working together at that precise moment in time. And yeah, so I would try and get them to focus on something. Then you could show that the work that they're producing delivers value to the rest of the team and the company and stuff like that. That does a couple of things. One, it gets their mojo back, because they must be in, depending where they are, right? They must be in sort of, I'm not delivering, I'm not being effective, I don't like this, right? So get them back to not exactly a happy place, but a productive place where they're able to deliver as themselves value. And that might just level them back out and go, right, okay, it was my behavior and interaction with that person that was making me feel like I wasn't delivering value, and that was making me angry and upset. Actually, having been given a particular focus that was away from that individual over here, I've shown that I can do my job and I can deliver, right? The flip side of that, of course, is that they just think that reinforces the fact that it's that git over there who's been the one that's stopping them being productive, right? So that can be a problem. But you can sort of talk them through that and say, do you see what and then go for a joint project, then bring them back together. And but the worst thing, or not the worst thing, the thing that managers, in my opinion, don't do enough is face into the issue. And so you're going to have to talk to these two individuals, and you're going to have to explain to them what you see is happening, or at least perceive is happening, in case there's something else happening, right? You're going to have to open up that conversation with them individually, and then together. You're going to have to talk about the impact of the team. You're going to have to do all this kind of stuff. Nobody wants to do it. It's a bit like parenting, right? Sort of thing. You'd rather just give them a Mars bar and send them off to the cinema, right? So then you have to face into it. You have to have the discussion with them, right? So I'm going to pause there and see what you think, Sophie, because that would be my approach. Would be to bit of cuddling, bit of sort of facing into them and stuff like that sort of thing. But we'll talk about more drastic measures if needed. But where are you with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you've said. I think not facing into it is a real challenge. For me, I think there are many different ways that you can approach this, and it'll depend on the personalities at play and, the size of the organization and who you want to be as a manager. Interestingly, I have been discussing a similar problem with a contact recently, which we actually started discussing it at an International Women's Day dinner last week. And I think for me, the three principles that come out, one, as you've touched on, what's really important is to intervene early and explicitly. There is nothing worse than letting something go on and not indicating clearly that this is not what we expect. I think the best example we gave when discussing this recently was, you move house and you meet your neighbor and you live there for 10 years and then eventually you leave. And only on leaving do they say, actually, I know you've been calling me Paul for the last 10 years, but my name was Steve.
Yeah.
And it's so embarrassing to not, have the courage to say, early days, we need to set this straight. This is the expectation. So I think really, letting them work it out themselves, it can work for smaller disagreements. But if you start to see this persistent conflict, then actively managing it is so important. And also, if you come in early, then the problem's smaller. If you leave it for days or weeks or months, then it's really going to balloon. And as you say, giving people space just lets them go away and ruminate and convince themselves even more that, they're in the right and the other person's in the wrong.
Yeah.
So I think for me, this really, that early intervention is speaking to each person individually, really understanding, empathizing with their concerns and their perspective, but also importantly, clarifying the impact of this sort of problem, particularly if it goes on, and setting expectations that this isn't something that we're going to let continue in the team. We will find a resolution, but the expectation is that we will find a resolution. And then something else, a sort of second step, is really separating the people from the problem. Yeah. And this is actually something, or it's similar to a topic we discussed at the London Tech Leaders Summit in autumn last year. One of the topics we had was, how long do you kind of put up with a toxic engineer if they're starting to damage the team? And the resounding answer was, well, we don't. But I think there's this challenge that these really senior, very skilled engineers come across, they sort of argue because they feel their expertise or their ownership and therefore their ego is threatened. So really saying, okay, well, it's not about you. It's sort of about this perspective that you have, the way that you're seeing the world that is separate from you as an individual, finding out what that position is and kind of taking that position from both individual and being able to frame it as a trade-off. It's never that one person's right and the other one is wrong, but if you have these conflicting perspectives that can be separated from the individuals, it's a lot easier to reconcile them. And then that leads me to sort of the third step, which is being able to introduce a really clear decision-making process that, it's not, I've spoken to both of you and I prefer that person, so we're going to go in their direction. It's more, we have two individuals, we've separated the perspectives from those individuals, and now we're going to feed those perspectives into a sort of detached, objective decision-making process. And it's a way to break the conflict, but also to help each individual really, one, see that you're not picking a favorite, but two, start to empathize with the aspects of the other person's perspective that maybe they didn't. So yeah, I think there are a number of different approaches you can take, and it'll really depend on the team and the individual. But, I think this is something that probably a lot of people face.
Part of the challenge, you just outlined three very clear approaches you can take, and possibly in combination with each other as well, right? Part of the challenge is I can imagine there's some people sitting here who maybe have a similar problem to this with some of their team, and are like, I just want to get on. We've got a lot of
Yeah.
work. Now I've got to set clear boundaries, and I've got to find them separate projects, and I've got to explain. I just want good people who do good work, and I just want to get on. And my answer to that is, welcome to leadership, right? This is one of the, not everybody's going to get on. You are going to require different skills and different talent and different levels of experience in the building. And sometimes they won't be perfectly in love with each other, right? And you're going to have to manage around that. But for those of you who are thinking, that sounds like a ball ache, actually, everything you just described could be done in a 2-week period, Sophie, right? Like, really quickly, right? I mean, you think about it. There's not much that can't be changed in terms of behavior, culture, the norm, that takes more than 2 weeks, right? You start a new job, first day, second day, 2 weeks, you're like, oh yeah, I belong here now, that's fine, right? So go on holiday.
Yeah.
You go on holiday for any more than 12 days, you don't ever feel like coming home because you're like, oh, I live here now, I'm used to it, so 2 weeks is a long period of time. If you get on it, early intervention, some of the things you just talked about, get them in place, bang, 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 2 weeks later, you'll know. But here's the bit that you have to do, and this is, as you say, we discussed it about, toxic geniuses, right? That's the particular one where everybody goes, I would get rid of them, they're a complete git, and everybody else hates them, but they're essential for Project X, right? So I think that's just a false economy. And this is where a little bit of courage, a little bit of bravery from the leaders come in. And actually, this particular listener who wrote in, I think they hit the nail on the head in reverse in their last sentence. It says, I'm worried that if this continues, it will damage morale and maybe even make good people leave. That's where you have to start. When those little things that you talked about that you can implement quickly don't work, if they don't work, you have to start with I've got to protect the rest of the team here, right? And that's where we got to at London Tech Leaders in our discussion with the toxic geniuses. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how you might need to plan it. You might need to plan their exit so the world doesn't blow up. Get on with planning it, place into that, because it's the rest of the team that matters. Because otherwise, you're going to have lots of people leaving. Then you're going to have to be sorting out the toxic geniuses argument over here, and some recruitment, and some delays, and some overspend on budget because the new people cost more than the old people. Right? Just don't do that. Face into it, get on with it, make those decisions, and do them fast. And toxic geniuses, get out of our way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have heard it here first. Out of the way for the toxic geniuses. And if you are a toxic genius, listen to this. Think how much more impactful you could be if you were just a genius. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, exactly. That was a good one, Sophie. I like that. Thanks for taking us through that one. Okay, so what have we done this week? Well, we tried to focus. We of course gave you the ever useful update on the big boys fighting in AI world, because we're always going to do that. But we talked a little bit about Meta smart glasses and TikTok and how they say they're trying to protect us, and then some ad features that we had, which are a little bit more personal. And then we did some fun robotic dogs and slime and all sorts of things. And then, of course, the Wall-E E style desk robot, which I think everybody should get. So we'll look at that. We went through talking about the evolving CTO mandate, that ever-changing world for CTO, CIO, strategic leaders. And there's some real follow-up on that going to be coming through the Wednesday, the 25th of March London Tech Leaders event. So get along there if you enjoy discussing that stuff a little bit more. And then we had the mid-episode game, which Sophie triumphed at this week. Excellent, catching up on me. And we rounded off with a nice disaster diary, which I'm sure everybody has had to face into with, not everybody in the team gets on. How do you make harmony work and get back to doing productive work? I think it's been a good chat through this week, Sophie. I'm off to Ireland again tomorrow, and going to go see my team out there and get some more stuff done. What about you? Got anything interesting coming up for the week?
Yes, I do. I have a lot of meetings and little spotty bits here and there to keep me very occupied. And then I'm hosting a hen party on Saturday and a baby shower on Sunday. So I will be exhausted on Monday, but I will definitely be back to take you down and make us even Stevens on the mid-episode game.
That sounds great. I won't indelicately ask whether the hen and the mother-to-be are the same person. I'll just leave that one hanging there. Nice to chat, Sophie. Have a great week. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, David.